Hey everybody, back with a little more content from the Content Minds here on YouTube, and definitely let me know in the comments down below what you thought about the Trump-Zelensky meeting. Obviously, the meeting is all everyone's talking about. It's, I'm kind of planning on this video to put aside some of the big picture stuff about transatlantic relations and the future of U.S. foreign policy and big picture things like that. But would be remiss if I didn't, just touch on that briefly. That obviously this is looking like more and more of a rupture in transatlanticism, a rupture in the order that was established after the United States and its allies won World War II. Would be really curious for y'all's take in the comments below. Do you see it that way? Do you see this as a permanent rupture of those relations, or is this more something that can be recovered from? I think obviously we've seen in the previous Trump administration, there tends to be a transactionalism to his policy making. People continue, it's sort of the think tank, cognoscenti type folks try to continue to find an ideological through line that kind of defines Trump foreign policy. I think, the most effective way to contextualize it is definitely just transactionalism. I'm kind of curious if you all see that as how this will play out, or if this is more of a, the personalities here have just clashed too much, and this is kind of is more of a permanent schism. All that aside, and I don't think anybody has that answer right now as much as the Fareed Zakarias of the world or the Brookings Institutes of the world want us to think that they do. I think it's wild, obviously, and unprecedented that we're in a situation where we would even be talking about that kind of a permanent end to the rules-based sort of liberal democratic world order. The fact that we're even talking about that being over is really something, and definitely I think affirms the potential historical significance of the meeting yesterday. But that said, I wanted to make more of just a quick video here to say I think this whole fiasco of a meeting really affirms my take from a few days ago that what we're looking at is the Ukrainian administration that does have its back up against the wall and does need to continue to fight, preserve the country, to preserve the lives of the Ukrainian people. And I think that's, ultimately some of what Trump's administration is miscalculating here, and what a lot of the analysts who sort of see this as a misstep by Zelensky are missing is, in a sense, Trump is right? Zelensky doesn't have necessarily a ton of room to maneuver here. Trump sees that, I think, as weakness in the sense that he's trying to use it to leverage Zelensky to take a deal that doesn't really benefit Ukraine or Zelensky's position. I think that's a fundamental misread, however, of where Ukraine is at, because it presupposes and it kind of takes as gospel some of the propaganda, some of the Russian disinformation that has been put out there about what a peace deal would look like. If you're actually on the ground in Ukraine, or indeed I think in Eastern Europe or in Europe more broadly, you've seen this pattern play out over and over again, where Russia has pushed for something like the Minsk agreement, and then that, without security guarantees, it ends up meaning nothing, right? And if you buy that Russia really intends for this peace to be a real one, obviously you think, oh, Zelensky's got his back against the wall, he's got no more cards to play. If, however, you're a reasonably informed observer of European affairs for the past 15 years or so, what you see is that only being true if there's a counter deal, if there's a deal on the table for the Ukrainians that functions as a real peace deal, a deal that doesn't have security guarantees, doesn't get them anything additionally to where they are now. It just sort of kicks the ball down the road, probably for not very long, as we saw with Minsk. So putting aside all of the what does this mean for the world order, what does this mean for the U.S. kind of BS that we can all kind of wring our hands about, right now Zelensky and the Ukrainians more broadly don't have the privilege, they don't have the option of waiting around. They don't have time to wait and see. They don't have time to approach meetings with Trump as Keir Starmer does or as Emmanuel Macron does. So there's not an option there. Zelensky can't go in there and not push back against disinformation and push back against empirically incorrect facts coming out of the Trump administration, because they need help now. They have to. They're in a war, right? There are people dying right now. Because they're in a war right now, the only option for this to end for them is obviously for the war to not continue, right? But what Trump continues to misread here is that for that to be the case, for the war to end for the Ukrainians in a verifiable and reliable way, there have to be security guarantees for the Ukrainians. Otherwise, the war is not over. And this was the point I made in my video last week, is that because of this reality, and because the Ukrainians do have such a powerful military, and a military that's grown in power, and because I think the Europeans continue to step up more and more, which Trump also continues to ignore. I mean, Rheinmetall right now, by most estimates, or most estimates that I've seen, at least coming out of the EU and out of, I think there was a Czech defense minister who said this at Brookings, but Rheinmetall is producing more artillery shells than the U.S. is now. Right, so Europe is. I mean, every video you see coming out of CSIS and Times Radio and all these different outlets and think tanks are saying, well, let's really step back and analyze how the Europeans are going to coalesce their defense capabilities and how they're going to rally around some kind of defense force. Obviously, even the lack of a European army really has been driven by the U.S., right? We've wanted to continue to run that through NATO, where we can kind of have the supervisory position over it. The Trump administration has kind of obviously destroyed that now, and is really pushing Europe to coalesce more around its own capabilities. But this is all to say, as I said in my original video, you can't force the Ukrainians to stop fighting, and you can't force the Europeans to stop fighting. It's very much in the Ukrainians' interest, obviously, and the Europeans' interest, obviously, to continue to fight against Russia in this situation. And without a credible peace that gives them some assurance, the Ukrainians and the Europeans gives them some assurance that this won't just continue in 2 years or 3 years or 4 years. Without that being in place, there is no peace deal, right? There's no reason for them to stop fighting. Will they continue to fight? I think it is increasingly clear that they will. My estimation in that original video was that they would probably, continue to fight and probably continue to slowly lose as they have been doing. That could change depending on how real the Europeans get with their support and how direct their interventions become. But this increasingly starts to look at what's happened around this press conference, right? It's one of the most embarrassing fiasco-like press conferences in U.S. presidential history. Now, obviously, right-wing media and right-wing influencers are going to have their marching orders and have their spin on it. But you can see with Zelenskyy's interview on Fox News, and you can see certainly on Our Conservative, on Reddit. I mean, the response to this is that basically this was an embarrassment for the Trump administration by anybody who's not directly involved with the Trump administration or coming to you from Moscow. So this again kind of supports my original supposition that if the Europeans continue to support Ukraine and the Ukrainians continue to fight, this will continue to sort of spiral into a real diplomatic fiasco and foreign relations fiasco for Donald Trump, because he'll continue to look weaker and weaker as we increasingly more and more abandon a democratic country, an ally, and really a constellation of allies whose interests align with rallying around Ukraine and supporting them. But until a credible alternative is proposed to have a peace with some kind of security guarantee for Ukraine, I mean, you just can't expect to come to the table with nothing for the Ukrainian side and then throw your hands up in disgust when they turn it down. It sort of strikes me as we've tried nothing, we're all out of ideas, right? And I think watching the actual press conference, you can see the degree to which, whether through malign intent or through ignorance or through some combination of both, or just drinking their own Kool-Aid. I mean, this is a crew of leaders on the U.S. side who really are detached from that strategic reality, right? They are so aligned, I think, with wanting to push the Russian agenda here and warm relations with Russia for whatever reason they might be. The reality is they are increasingly just disconnected from anything that could resemble an empirical view of the situation that can align with a peace plan. When Donald Trump says that Zelenskyy isn't ready for peace, it really highlights the distance from certified empirical reality that the administration is, in the sense that, of course, he's not ready for peace. His country is in a war. There is no reason that he would be ready for peace, because nothing has been offered to him that would credibly indicate the war would be over. And I think this is the danger of the kind of self-contained hubris that we're seeing within the Trump administration. Is it's not so much that Zelensky's not ready for peace, it's just that he's not ready for your peace, or he's not ready for your idea of what peace would look like. And that really is not, that's just sort of negotiation 101, right? If there's not something on the table for both parties, there won't be an agreement. So that's sort of my thoughts on this for today. I think it's quite clear the Europeans are consolidating and ramping up defense spending. You can see that with a lot of the European defense stocks, for example, skyrocketing when a lot of other things aren't right now. But yeah, I think it's clear the Europeans see this temporarily or permanently as, the U.S. isn't a partner that they can rely on. I think the Ukrainians increasingly see that as well, and that sort of creates the kind of interactions that we saw yesterday. But it's clear the Ukrainians and the Europeans are going to keep moving forward with this. They're going to keep moving forward with defending democracy in Europe. And I think it will continue to serve as something of an embarrassment. Not that that's even the highest priority or the biggest deal of what's happened, but it will continue to be an embarrassment for the Trump administration, and I think by extension, the American people, that we are abrogating our duty there to support a democratic ally for reasons that sort of remain to be seen. I don't really see a reason for this to be happening. Certainly, I don't see a strategic reason for us to be making this decision right now. But that's it for me. Thanks again for tuning in. Looking forward to your comments as always. Appreciate it.